We start out with what I call the threat probability matrix. And that is, what is the probability that any given threat that we would prepare for will actually happen to you in your lifetime? So these would be things that generally people, when you watch TV, worry about are really bad, but actually the probability are really low, but that's what everybody focuses on. And what I mean by that would be global thermonuclear war would be one example. The probability that you're going to see the whole world nuke itself in your lifetime is actually really, really low. And don't worry about how bad it is if it happens. That's the next thing. Just follow me through this. The odds that you will see an asteroid impact the planet in an extinction level event like we think knocked out the dinosaurs are very, very low that will happen in your lifetime. The odds that an EMP from the sun, an electromagnetic pulse from the sun, will actually be intense enough to truly take down the global electrical grid, very, very low. The odds that we'll have a pandemic that will wipe out 90% of the population are actually pretty damn low. Okay, these are all the things that people prepare for. These are all the things that the people who sell stuff to the preparedness industry use fear, uncertainty, and doubt to market to you with. Okay, and if I sound a little hoarse, I'm still recovering from the workshop that we just did, so I apologize for that. But that's the stuff that's on the extreme low probability side. Even if the probability that something like that will eventually happen, sooner or later this planet will get hit by an asteroid again. The odds that it will happen to you are relatively low. And then we have the disaster impact scale, okay? And we'll kind of tie this into the threat probability matrix, but I'm going to go there because new people are going to be like, but, what if, okay? What if we do have a Yellowstone supervolcano eruption, or an EMP, or we have a CME, something like that, a coronal mass ejection from the sun. I'm sorry if I said EMP earlier for that, or an EMP like somebody gets a hold of a nuke and detonates it over New York City or something like that. That is the impact scale, and those impacts are huge. Like, it's awful if something like that happens. It's earth changing if something like that happens. But the odds are still low. So when we look at the impact scales, we move down the impact. And when I say impact here, I mean number of people impacted in a serious way. So even something like Hurricane Katrina, the direct impact was a relatively low number of people compared to the total population of the United States and certainly the total population of the world. Okay, so it's a higher probability because the impact is lower. So if we want to say, well, what are the odds that you'll ever be in a terrible hurricane like Katrina? They're middle of the road, and if you say, well, I live in a place where those don't happen, then as long as you stay there, they're very, very low for you. But something equivalent is probably about the same. Maybe you live where a major ice storm could shut down all activity in your city for a week or two, or like several years happen to go in some areas, 3 weeks. Right, so that type of disaster, that regional level disaster that has that middle of the road possibility of affecting you is still pretty severe. But when we come down and say, well, what are the disasters that affect a neighborhood or a family or an individual, the probability that you'll experience one of those disasters in your life is an almost certainty. Because those disasters would be losing your job at a bad time. Okay? It could be a financial disaster that destroys families and causes them to lose their home. By the way, we're going to talk about your 5 survival needs today, and one of your survival needs is a shelter. So if you lose your home, that's bad. You've lost one of your survival needs that you thought you had met, and you got to figure out something else. So don't tell me it's not a disaster. A financial collapse is like, where everything just goes away to nothing. That's a big impact. It affects the whole country. Odds it's going to happen to you much lower. This whole thing, the dollar will become worthless in 5 minutes. Not going to happen. If you want to worry about the economy being destroyed, it's happening right now in front of you so slowly over so long that you're adapting to it as we go, and it's too deep of a subject today. But a recession like we experienced in 2008 and 2009 affected a fairly large number of people. It probably affected you. But it actually affected to the point of seriously altering the lives of people, a small number compared to the total, probably 8 to 9% of the population of the country. That doesn't mean your 401k didn't go down. You maybe didn't have to take a different job or adapt in some way. But the people who really got hit hard, relatively low number. But yet, pretty likely that you'll have to deal with the consequences of a recession, even if there's no recession going on. You can lose your job when there's no recession. Having a loved one become terminally ill is a disaster for a family. Having a loved one have a serious illness, even if they survive, it could be a disaster for a family, especially if they're primary breadwinner. Imagine if dad, who's the primary breadwinner, who's been doing everything, and mom's been a stay-at-home mom for 15 years, has no real skill in the marketplace. Dad has a serious heart attack. Now he survives and we're all glad he's alive, but he just can't go back to doing what he was doing. He has to adapt and do something else. This can be a disaster for a family, but it will be a disaster for a family unprepared. This is the impact scale. It's not that it's not a huge thing for you. It's that it's only a huge thing for a smaller number of people. And the lower the number of people affected, the higher the probability that it will happen to you. So there's an inverse relationship or an inverse ratio there. So we should actually start at the disasters that we think of as being everyday disasters because they happen every day. It would just make sense. The good news is if we do that, and we do the best we can to prepare for the individual disasters, then what will happen is we'll go a long way toward being prepared for the bigger disasters, at least the large regional disasters like a major ice storm, a Hurricane Sandy, a Hurricane Katrina, a Hurricane Rita, a Hurricane Ike. These are ones that are just coming to me. But those types of disasters, you are best able to get prepared for those by starting with the things that are what we consider, again, mundane, workaday, everyday things, like being robbed, having your house burned down. These are all things you should be well prepared for before you even bother to research the first words about what an EMP is. Because if you ain't prepared for a bad thunderstorm, you ain't prepared for the apocalypse. I'm sorry. You have to go in a linear fashion with preparedness.